morning, everyone. Sorry, can everyone hear me? Yeah. So good morning, everyone. I'm Janlo Reyes. I'm from JLL Philippines. Just a bit of background on JLL. So we are a Fortune 500 company. We're a global real estate services firm that offers end-to-end solutions for real estate. So what that means is that we're there at every touch point for your real estate journey. So whether that you're starting out, you have a property and don't know what to do with it, our team can handle basically the ideation or the concept based on what to develop on your property. We also have the acquisition or disposal team. We also have project development services who can manage the build-up of the project. We also have the leasing team who can help you find tenants for your building. At the same time, we do have the property and facilities management to maintain the property. So we are there in every touch point of the cycle. We have the services to cover all of those needs that you have. Here in the Philippines, we've been here since 1997, where we're now managing 4.8 million square meters of real estate portfolio. We're now 1,300 employees distributed in 86 sites across the country. And what has been happening in recent years is that we received a lot of inquiries about that is the industrial market. We have a lot of clients asking about the industrial sector. And this cuts across all of our service lines, not just for leasing. From our end, the research and consulting side, we've done a lot of industrial market studies, not only in Metro Manila, but Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And then this, I think, speaks volume to the interest or the growing popularity or the prominence of the industrial sector in the Philippines. Yeah, there. And our data supports this. If you're going to look at the data that we have here, this is for the provinces of Cavite, Laguna, and Batangas. Land supply has been significantly expanding in the past 8 to 10 years. Similarly, land values have been exhibiting the same trend. And if we're going to look at the significant supply expansion, supply has grown by 15% in the past 8 to 10 years. On the land value side, what's astounding is really the growth of land values. So it's a 77% growth between 2009 to 2017. If we're going to look at it on an annual basis, that's a price growth of 8.5% every year. So that's a significant growth in terms of investment value for industrial properties. And key here is really infrastructure. And the government has done a great job in terms of infrastructure spending. Last year, they recorded around an infrastructure spending to GDP ratio of 6.2%. This is a shade below the 6.3% targeted, but nonetheless still positive. If you're going to consider, for example, the historical performance of around 2 to 3% spending. And the government by 2022 is expecting to reach around 7.2% in terms of infrastructure spending relative to the GDP. While all of this has been really good for the economy and for the industrial property market, I think there's still room for growth. And where we find this room for opportunity is really through marrying the infrastructure with the real estate component. And what we found and what we've observed is for a lot of real estate and infrastructure projects, these are usually independent of one another. Normally, these are typically seen as an accessory or a complementary use for one another, but never has been integrated in a way that the development is centered on an entire infrastructure. But we've improved on this aspect, as we've seen, for example, as we move towards like smart cities, we do have the airport cities or airtropolis. And they also have like transit-oriented developments. But still, a lot of these are really focused on the mixed-use developments, commercial, office, residential, retail. And there's really not a lot of conversation that we're having about the industrial market. And so here, we're talking about something that's rarely talked about in the industrial market, which is basically cargo-oriented developments. So what are cargo-oriented developments? It's not a new concept, actually. It's been implemented in other countries, but the literature is quite thin if you're going to look at the internet. Not a lot is mentioned about cargo-oriented developments, but Simply put, it's really an industrial estate attached to, to a multimodal transport infrastructure. And there's just two elements basically to this one. Number one is real estate. The other one is the multimodal transport infrastructure. And to elaborate on this, it's really this is what you see in an industrial estate. So you have the assembly plants, the manufacturing plants, you have the warehouse and logistics, you have the trucking services. So this form part of what you find in an industrial park. But normally these industrial parks are only tied to an infrastructure, or to a road network. Sometimes it might be tied to one infrastructure like airport, maybe a seaport, but not connected to two at the same time. And this is where the beauty of the cargo-oriented developments come in. It's basically a multimodal infrastructure network. And what do we mean by that? So it's not just connecting one seaport or airport or railway to an industrial estate, but it's actually a combination of those three things. So it's just one seamless integrated operations from your origin from the port or from your industrial park to the intended destination. And that's really been the biggest thing about this cargo-oriented developments. And if we're going to look at the advantages of cargo-oriented developments, there's actually a lot. But they generally fall under three aspects. So number one is social. Number two is economic. And then lastly, we talk about the environment. And I think we could start this off with an example which everyone can relate to and touches on all three aspects. It's basically the Metro Manila traffic. Just a show of hands, like who spends 1 hour on the road here? Who spends 2 hours? Who spends 3 hours? There's one there. Who spends 4 hours? None. Good for you guys, but for my end, I spend 30 to 45 minutes driving from my home to my office. I know of colleagues who traveled 4 hours one way every day, and then another 4 hours going back. So that's 8 hours of their lives spent on the road. So imagine that, being on the road for 8 hours, wherein you could sleep, eat, work, and do other things. And I think a lot of this is attributed to our infrastructure, and we're running at overcapacity. For EDSA specifically, you're looking at 288,000 vehicles on a day. That's basically the identified capacity of EDSA. But the actual usage is around 403,000. That's over by 100,000 vehicles every day. No wonder everywhere is traffic if we're going to look at Metro Manila. And that's just for EDSA. You could look at other major infrastructure thoroughfares, C5, Katipunan Avenue. All of them would indicate that everything is over capacity. And I think a lot of this is really causing a lot of productivity loss. JICA estimates around 3.5 billion pesos that's lost every day just because of traffic. Imagine that, 3.5 billion just because of traffic, just because you have to spend 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, or even 4 hours on the road. And how does COD help? Here, you can see an image of the space taken up by a bus, by motorcycles, and by vehicles. So we're going to look at it. On the far right side, you have the cars. It's taking up a lot of the space on the road. If you move the motorcycles, you do have this, but still modest occupancy of the road. And then you have the bus. Imagine if you only have an efficient bus transit, we would need all of those cars. And I'm using this as a parallel example for cargo-oriented developments, because this typically for passengers. If you're going to convert, for example, this bus in terms of the equivalent number of like the semi-trailers that you would need, you would look at the far left side of the screen. You will need 1,000 large semi-trailers, and that would fit in 216 rail cars and locomotives. So imagine the savings that you would have in terms of the volume of cars, of trucks along EDSA, along all of the thoroughfares of Metro Manila. But not only that, we move on to the economic side. We're looking at CODs as unlocking land values definitely in the provinces or areas outside Metro Manila. And from there, what you've seen is that if you see a road net or a transport project or even a property development, what you found is that property values rise by around 5 to 10%, depending on where we are. In the industrial area, in the Santo Tomas area, before the Calamba exit was built, the industrial parks there were not really fully occupied yet. Not a lot of sale was happening, not a lot of movement, and prices were quite low just because of that. But once the Calamba exit was built up, it led to a high take-up of these industrial parks, and it skyrocketed the prices to around 8% just because of that completion. I think one other thing about that is really the tax revenue that you could generate. So imagine putting up a transport infrastructure, imagine putting up a logistics hub in that area, in these provinces. That could unlock a lot of tax revenue for the government itself. In terms of the private side, we're looking at, again, seamless integration. And this is basically the cornerstone of what we have for CODs. Because the byproducts of this are two. Basically, higher speed and lower costs. And we know for a fact that speed equates to service when talking about the logistics industry. It's a highly competitive industry that once you lose track of a customer, they're gone forever. I have one colleague who was complaining about how her delivery was postponed for a few days, and she immediately reported it to DTI. And that's like for one small package. How much more for like a bigger one? How much more for more crucial supply of goods and services? I think a good example or principle of this application, this seamless integration, is really to the roll-on and roll-off concept. A study showed that overall costs were cut by 23% just because of the roll-on, roll-off initiative. And travel time was cut by 15%. So imagine the savings that's brought about that seamless integration. And that's what COD does. It basically connects you from one point to another without having to go through different vendors. Because currently, what you have is different vendors or providers servicing you from point A to point B, and then from point B to point C, and from point C to point D. You have, imagine, the work that has to be done, the cost that is attributed or attached to those negotiations, to those discussions, it's quite high. And that's COD, what COD does is really lessen the friction there. So lowering the touch points of what you have here in terms of the overall logistics process. In terms of the social aspect, again, we're talking about the decentralization of developments or progress. So driving economic growth in provinces or beyond Metro Manila. At the same time, I think the direct byproduct of this is really generating employment. And this is something that's sorely needed by the country also. And the reason why a lot of the people are really flocking into Metro Manila for employment opportunities. Because this is where all of the businesses are, all of the businesses are agglomerated, all of the job opportunities are present. But imagine if you could bring that job opportunities to these locations through the COD. We don't have to suffer worsening traffic congestion. We don't have to worry about unemployment rates in Metro Manila. Could also foster economic growth in these provinces, in these growth areas. So there's many more benefits to a COD. And I guess last point would be sustainability or environment. So as I would refer back to the earlier slide about the number of buses, number of cars, number of motorcycles required to move passengers. And imagine if you could just eliminate the volume of cars or vehicular traffic on the road, that would significantly reduce carbon footprint in the country. At the same time, if you have a COD, you could incorporate like green features in your development, like walkable features and bicycle lanes. Because at the end of the day, apart from the business itself, you will need people to support the workforce in that area. And there's a lot, again, these are just some of the benefits of a COD. If you're going to look at it, it goes beyond actually the industrial space. What you can create there through a COD is really an ecosystem. Because apart from the employment that could be generated from the industrial market, you would need offices for these industrial operations. You would need accommodation for your workforce. You might probably need a hotel to house your business travelers. And lastly, you would need like malls, just to drive the goods and services back and forth between the industrial sites and also the consumers themselves. So here are some of the models, some of the examples of CODs. So we have one in the US, one in Sydney, and the last one is in China. So I think you could look these up, but basically what they would tell you is that how these are all multimodal terminals, meaning they don't only have like one access to a transport hub or transport mode, not only through railway, but also access to seaports, to airports, and these all connect to an industrial site and also to the market themselves. What's important about these developments is that there's a lot of government push. So basically, it's really driven by the government with strong participation also from the private segment. And that's, again, an opportunity for CODs in helping both the public and private sector join together in terms of driving economic growth in the country. And I think it's a timely conversation to have, considering that we have 75 build projects currently. If you're going to look at it, you have 9 railways, 7 airports, and 1 seaport. So imagine the opportunity for us to connect all of these things, all of these developments, into one seamless, integrated transport hub. But not only that, I think if we're going to zoom on some of these developments, there. I want to zoom in on the railway because it's an integral part of what a COD is. Because this will connect the airport, seaport, and the industrial estate all together. And I want to highlight the PNR, the PNR Clark Railway, and also the PNR Bicol Railway. So that one connecting north and the one connecting south. So I think this is a good opportunity for a COD, at least a backbone for what a COD is in the future. So what we did here is that we used our Mapit platform. So basically, we have this in-house platform that utilizes ArcGIS. And what we did was plotted the different stations of the PNR North Railway. So that's connecting Manila to Clark. And mind you, these are not the identified locations, but basically just estimate or approximate locations of these stations. So we have 17 stations altogether, from Manila up until Capas Tarlac, to where New Clark City is. And then here, what we did was overlay that with like the trucking time. So meaning, this can refer to this as the last mile, referring to the time from the transportation hub up until to the consumers, the measure of travel time. And that's indicated here in the blue shaded area. There's a lot of area to cover. So imagine if you were transporting a good or a shipment from Manila up until Clark Freeport Zone. That takes you around 55 minutes. After that, you would have to have 20 minutes just for your good or the shipment to arrive to your intended destination. That's typically a third of what you would usually spend 2 to 3 hours traveling or shipping goods from Metro Manila to Clark. And again, I highlight the seamless integration and the efficiency of CODs, utilizing these different transport platforms in shipping or transporting goods. What we did here is basically identify some upcoming and existing developments, both industrial and also township developments. So here are some. We have Alviera by Ayala. We have Clark Global City. We have the new Clark City as well. And look at the proximity of these developments with regard to the identified PNR stations. They're quite near, actually. If you're going to look at the next slide, that includes the industrial parks. We have Teco, we have the Logistic Industrial Park. So what we just wanted to highlight here is really to build awareness in terms of the opportunity that we have for cargo-oriented developments. We do have a favorable the economic environment. The logistics market is growing. At the same time, we do have a lot of infrastructure projects, and it's being pushed by a proactive government. At the same time, we do have a healthy real estate market, as marked by these different developers or township developments across all of these infrastructure projects. And this is one. This is the PNR. Imagine the other infrastructure project that we have. Imagine the existing infrastructure that we have. And if we could just connect all of those, the existing ones with the upcoming ones, with the existing developments, and with also the upcoming developments, imagine the opportunity that we have in terms of creating cargo-oriented developments. Again, if you're going to look at it in terms of the benefits, it's all there. It touches all social, economic, and environmental, giving way to both, again, an opportunity for the infrastructure and the real estate component to work together. Because I go back to what I've mentioned earlier, what we found is that there's still a room for growth in terms of marrying infrastructure with real estate. And cargo-oriented developments is definitely a way for us to bridge that gap. Thank you and good morning.